Hello, dear friend. Welcome to Healing Pages channel, the safe haven where every page you turn brings you gently back to yourself. If you've stumbled upon this video, maybe you're a bit like me, someone who, in the quiet stillness of midnight, has typed their unspoken questions into Google, hoping to find an answer. Maybe you've sat on a crowded bus, surrounded by strangers, and still felt like the loneliest person in the world. There are moments when life slips through our fingers, filled with noise, deadlines, and the haunting questions we never dare to voice out loud. Am I good enough? Am I heading in the right direction? Or simply, am I okay? I've been there. I know what it's like to wait for someone. Not someone perfect. Not someone who hands out glossy advice. But just someone kind enough to listen. Honest enough to say, I hear you. I truly do. And then, I found Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed. This isn't your typical self-help book. There are no 10 steps to a better you. No mind maps or personality quizzes. And yet, this book moved me more deeply than any structured self-development guide ever could. Not because it offered solutions, but because it offered empathy. It felt like a hug. Like a whisper, saying, I've been there too. If you're looking for a book that speaks to you the way a true friend would, honest but never cruel, raw but never hopeless, Tiny Beautiful Things might just be the book your heart has been waiting for. Step into this world with me, where every letter is a story, and every story is a little light for the parts of us still searching. Tiny Beautiful Things is a collection of letters from the once anonymous Dear Sugar advice column on the Rumpus. Cheryl Strayed, behind the pseudonym, opened her heart to questions sent from people all around the world, responding not as a therapist or expert, but as a human being shaped by her own scars. Every letter in this book is a conversation, raw, unpolished, yet deeply sincere, between someone lost and someone who knows what it means to be lost and found again. This book doesn't follow a plot. It doesn't have a central character. Instead, it's a tapestry of real human voices, people grappling with the messiness of love, grief, identity, pain, hope, and the deep yearning to live a life true to themselves. And through it all, Cheryl's voice rises, gentle, steady, like a mother who has weathered storms and now sits beside you to say, life can be brutal, but you're going to be okay. And to truly understand why these words hold such weight, we need to look at the woman behind them, Cheryl Strayed. She's not just a gifted writer, she's the author of the best-selling memoir Wild, which was later adapted into a film starring Reese Witherspoon. But before she was an author, she was a daughter who lost her mother at 22, a woman who spiraled into addiction, someone who wandered, literally and emotionally, through the deserts of her life. And it was this journey, one of heartbreak, grit, and brutal honesty, that made her capable of healing others with nothing but words. She never hides her wounds. Instead, she writes about them with a tenderness that breaks you open, not for pity, but as proof that pain does not make you weak. It makes you deeper, kinder, more capable of love. And perhaps, that's why Tiny Beautiful Things is not just a book. It's a sanctuary, a place where you can show up exactly as you are, with your joy, your sorrow, your tangled thoughts, and your unanswered questions, and be told, gently and truthfully, you are not alone. I don't quite remember if I read Tiny Beautiful Things on a rainy afternoon or beneath a golden morning sun. I can't tell you whether I was doing fine or falling apart when I first opened its pages, but what I do remember, so vividly, is the feeling it gave me. It felt like sitting across from a stranger who somehow knew me deeply, someone who didn't rush to fix or judge, but simply sat there, looked into my eyes, and listened, patiently, tenderly, without looking away. There were moments when I paused for a long time, not because the words were difficult to understand, but because they had touched a sadness I never dared to name. There were lines that made me want to cry, not because they were tragic, but because they were so honest, so real, that I could no longer keep hiding from myself. This book, in its quiet and unpretentious way, pulled me gently back to who I was, not with grand advice or cliched affirmations, but with a voice that seemed to say, "I've been where you are, and you're not wrong for feeling what you feel." Each letter in Dear Sugar tells a story, sometimes of a single mother barely holding it together, sometimes of a young woman whose heart just broke, sometimes of a man lost in grief after losing his wife, or a teenager unsure how to live in a body and mind that never quite felt like home. These people aren't perfect. They don't have elegant words or 5-year plans. They're writing in their most vulnerable moments, when their lives feel like they could fall apart at any second. And somehow, between the tears and the trembling sentences, I saw pieces of myself in them. My fears, my wounds, my quiet hopes. And then there's Cheryl, not replying with formulas for healing or 3-step guides to recovery, but simply by sharing her own truth. She speaks of her mother's sudden death, of her years of being lost, of falling in love with the wrong people and hurting herself because she didn't believe she deserved better. There's no pretending, no distance, just one human who has suffered reaching out to another who is suffering, with all the courage and rawness that takes. I still remember one particular letter that left me completely still. A woman wrote in, asking how she could ever forgive herself, for the past, for the choices she couldn't undo, for the guilt she carried like a heavy stone on her back. And Cheryl responded, not with judgment, not with lofty philosophy, but with a single line that I will never forget. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of forgiveness. You just have to be kind. Kind to yourself. The way you've tried so hard to be kind to everyone else. Reading that felt like someone had reached in and loosened an invisible knot I had been carrying in my chest for years. Because the truth is, many of us, especially when we're young, walk around feeling like we're not enough, like we need to try harder, be better, fix more things, live more correctly in order to earn our own love. But Cheryl? She looks at imperfection and says, that's what makes you real. That's what makes you lovable. One thing I deeply appreciate about this book is that it doesn't try to give you all the answers. It's not a solution center. It's a sacred space for your questions. A space where you can see that others are just as confused as you. A space where you're allowed to feel, without being rushed toward improvement. And in a world that constantly pushes us to be more efficient, more productive, more resilient, Tiny Beautiful Things offers something incredibly rare, a gentle pause, a long, deep, healing breath. Cheryl teaches us something that sounds simple, but is so often forgotten. Sometimes, we don't need a fix. We just need someone to sit beside us, to say, you're allowed to feel this way, you're not wrong, and you're not alone. Let's begin together. The gentle, profound lessons of healing from Tiny Beautiful Things. Pain is not failure. Pain is proof that you have lived. For a long time, I used to think that if I was hurting, if I couldn't hold myself together, if I wasn't strong enough to move on after a loss, it meant I had failed, that I was weak, that I wasn't capable of owning my life. But then I read Tiny Beautiful Things, and something shifted within me. I started to see things differently, to understand that the cracks, the silence, the nights of feeling hollow and helpless, they weren't signs of failure, but evidence of a life deeply lived. In this book, Cheryl doesn't soften the pain or wrap it in pretty packaging. She lets it show in all its rawness, uneven, chaotic, human. There are letters from people who lost their mothers, their partners, their children, or even themselves. They write not from a place of resolution, but in the thick of grief, still unsure how to move on. And what makes Cheryl so extraordinary is that she doesn't urge them to be positive. She doesn't push them to recover quickly. She simply stays. With her words, she sits beside their sorrow and gently reminds them, pain doesn't make you ugly. It makes you wiser, more human, more alive. When we allow ourselves to grieve, we're not giving up. We're showing up. When we cry over what we've lost, it means we once loved, once cared, once dared to hope. And that doesn't make us weak. That makes us real. And our hearts, even with their cracks, are still beautiful. You don't have to be strong all the time. Sometimes, The bravest thing is to be tender. There are days when we wake up and find no reason to leave the bed. Afternoons when we break down over something so small no one else understands. Moments when we want to disappear. Not because we hate the world, but because we're too tired to keep holding it up. And in those moments, what we need isn't a cheerful "you got this." What we need is someone willing to be there with us, even when we have nothing to offer. In one letter, a woman writes that she always feels the need to seem okay, for her children, her colleagues, her friends. She's the rock, the inspiration, the one who is always fine, but deep inside, she feels fractured, exhausted, lonely. And Cheryl doesn't give her a solution. She simply nods through the page and says, "You don't always have to be okay. You have the right to fall apart, to sit down and say, 'Today, I don't have it in me.'" We've grown up in a world that tells us to hide our sadness, that vulnerability equals weakness. But this book teaches something different. That admitting you're tired, that speaking the chaos in your heart out loud, is its own quiet act of courage. Because only when we are honest with ourselves, can we begin to truly heal. The smallest things can save us on our darkest days. There's one line from the book that still echoes through me like a soft, steady melody. Always choose love, even in the smallest things. And I realized sometimes, a warm cup of coffee on a cold morning can save your whole day. A simple message, "Are you okay?" from a friend you haven't spoken to in months can remind you that you matter. A hug, a glance, a kind word from a stranger. In our loneliest, most unraveling moments, it's often the smallest acts that keep us tethered to the world. Tiny Beautiful Things isn't just a book of big stories. It's a gentle reminder that beauty lives in the small, the quiet, the overlooked. That healing doesn't always come through epic breakthroughs. Sometimes, all it takes is someone sitting beside you, not saying much, but staying fully present, unshaken, real. This lesson came to me so softly, and yet it stayed so deeply. Because in the rush of today's world, it's easy to forget the small things. We chase big goals, big wins, the perfect version of ourselves, and we forget that true peace often lives in the simplest of moments. Like a book by your bedside. Like a moment of silence without notifications. Like a reply from a stranger who loves enough to see you, truly see you, for who you are. By the time I reached the final page of Tiny Beautiful Things, one truth echoed gently in my heart. Perhaps the most important truth the book left with me. And it is this: no matter who you are, no matter how old you are, no matter where you are in your life right now, you are carrying at least one unanswered question inside of you. It could be a sadness you've never found the words to express. It could be a hidden corner of your past you've been trying to avoid. It could be guilt, confusion, weariness. Or it could be a quiet, lingering question that lives somewhere deep in your chest. Am I worthy of being loved? Have I taken the wrong path? Will anyone ever truly understand me? And in that moment of reflection, Tiny Beautiful Things stops being just a book. It becomes a mirror, a gentle one that doesn't judge, doesn't examine you under harsh light, but simply reflects who you are, with all your beauty, your scars, and your softness. Cheryl Strayed listened to thousands of letters from strangers, but the miracle is, as you read these letters, you begin to feel as if they were written for you. Each fear, each fragile hope, each aching doubt, they sound so familiar, so close, so deeply human. And then I found myself wondering, if I wrote a letter to Sugar, what would I say? Would I tell her about the years I kept going until I burned out completely and no one even noticed? Would I admit that some days, I just want to disappear? Not to be dramatic, but simply to rest from being myself? Would I dare to confess that I fear love, because I fear being abandoned once again? It was only when I asked myself those questions that I understood why this book reaches so many hearts. Because this book allows us to be honest. It doesn't ask us to be perfect to be heard. It simply reminds us, you deserve to be heard. Because you are a human being who is living, breathing, feeling. Tiny Beautiful Things doesn't try to fix you or make you better according to some social standard. It doesn't push you towards some shiny version of yourself that the world expects you to become. Instead, it gives you space to breathe, to pause where you are, to gently look back at the road you've walked, and to whisper to yourself, "It's okay. I may not be fine yet, but I'm trying." And maybe that's already enough. I think sometimes what we need the most isn't a solution. It's a place to rest, a place to lay down our thoughts, to be reminded that sadness doesn't make us weak, it makes us real. And when someone, even someone we've never met, like sugar, reads our truth and reflects it back to us with tenderness, we feel just a little less alone in the world. Not everyone needs a self-help book. Not everyone is looking for advice. But I believe, at some point in life, every one of us needs someone to listen. Someone who's walked through the storm and can gently say, "I understand. I've been there. And I'm still here." Tiny Beautiful Things is that kind of book. It doesn't pat you on the back and say, "Be strong." It doesn't push you forward with shiny motivation. It simply walks beside you, telling raw, honest stories, and quietly invites you to pause, to feel, to breathe, to ask yourself, how have I been living lately? Have I been kind to myself? And sometimes, just that moment of stillness, is already healing. I can't promise this book will solve your problems. I can't promise it will instantly lift the weight from your heart. But I believe, if you read these letters with an open heart, if you let Cheryl's words echo in you like a quiet, wordless melody, something will stir inside you. Maybe it'll be a sense of relief. Maybe a quiet nod of recognition. Or maybe, for the first time in a very long time, you'll feel like you're not alone anymore. And if that happens, then this book, just like you, has already done something deeply, beautifully meaningful. If you've read Tiny Beautiful Things, I'd love for you to share a quote, a letter, or simply a moment from the book that stayed with you. And if you haven't yet, but you're looking for a book that feels like a soul friend in your most uncertain moments, try opening this one. You might just find a piece of yourself inside it. And if this video felt like a small, gentle thing that warmed your heart today, please give it a like, leave me a message, and subscribe to the channel, so we can keep walking this journey together, through books that heal, soften, and connect us. Because I truly believe, in a world full of noise, sometimes, just having a small space to listen, and to be listened to, is enough to remind us that life is still beautiful. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, you're not alone.